Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Wednesday, June 14th, 2017. The Orange Madman has done it again. He has peed all over himself, his attempt to repeal and replace Obamacare, and the Republican legislators who've been doing the heavy lifting for the Donald. So in comments delivered yesterday to a group of Republican senators, Trump reportedly described the bill that he championed, that he helped ram through the Congress in early May, and who led the celebration in the Rose Garden on the 4th of May. But Donald Trump now says that the bill that he put so much of his political capital behind is mean. And he urged senators to craft a version that is more generous. Now, this is remarkable because it's true. The Republican plan that Paul Ryan hatched and rammed through without any amendments, most people hadn't even read the bill. It wasn't scored by the Congressional Budget Office. Nobody knew at the time how much it might cost, how many people would lose coverage over time. And we now know 23 million people estimated to lose coverage. And it is mainly a Trojan horse to allow Republicans to pass tax cuts and claim that they're not increasing the deficit. And these are tax cuts that nobody needs. It is just a way for the 1% to reward themselves and transfer even more wealth to those who already have so much. And I find this fascinating. On May 4th, Trump called it a great plan. Now, chances are he had no idea what he was referring to, hadn't bothered to read it. Nobody even gave him a one-page memo to, help him with it. Maybe they could use comic books or, short videos to help him understand this stuff. But what is really at play here is the potential for really serious problems. First of all, let's talk about the consumers who are facing an uncertain future about how much health insurance is going to cost, whether they will be able to buy it next year at all, and if the coverage will be watered down so badly to make it almost meaningless. And Trump continues to sabotage Obamacare, giving speeches and talking about how ugly it is, how bad it is, how expensive it is, and most of those comments are lies. So he has succeeded in helping Obamacare implode. Insurance companies are fleeing from the marketplace. And again, the uncertainty is rattling every element, the producer side, the profit-taking side, and those who simply don't want to die because they don't have health insurance and a catastrophic accident or illness befalls them. Now, the political calculus here is highly risky as well. And I will take you back to 1993, when a new president named Bill Clinton staked a lot of his early political credibility on a package of what he called investments. It was a stimulus package, an effort to rev up the economy. And he did a lot of arm twisting. And he put many Democrats in the House of Representatives at risk because they did dutifully follow the party line, took the orders from the White House, they voted for it, and then the Senate never touched it. This became a huge target for Newt Gingrich, who was organizing Republicans between 92 and 94. He had this scheme where he would record comments and talking points, tell people how to talk about the death tax and other things. They were distributed on cassette tapes to members of the Republican caucus and those who wanted to join them. And in 1994, there was a sweep led by Newt Gingrich and the Republicans. The Democrats lost control of the House. And the way that Bill Clinton orphaned those Democrats in 93 was a key reason that the Democrats lost in 94. And so I wish we could hear more than just the mean comment and his aspiration that the Republicans who are secretly working on a health care bill in the Senate will do something that he called more generous. But this just shows how ill-informed this guy is, how detached from policy he is. He just wants to win. He wants to be the guy who gets to gloat in front of the microphone and for the cameras when something that is considered part of the Republican agenda gets moved forward. And I am linking to the commentary at the Washington Post today by one of their conservative op-ed writers, Jennifer Rubin, because she is blistering in her slamming of Trump. Here's a quote. "Trump, of course, cares not even a tiny bit about substance, and we have yet to see him demonstrate even a rudimentary knowledge of what was in the bill. Having made a bargain with a policy know-nothing who lacks any interest in anything but his own winning, Republicans now find themselves excoriated for the very same reason Democrats lambasted the bill." Here's another quote. "Trump's defects make it nearly impossible for Ryan to achieve his aims." Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House. "Republicans now wind up with the worst of all worlds. They are getting virtually none of their big-ticket legislative items through. Republicans who voted for the AHCA, Trump Care, will get clobbered for passing a mean bill. They are shackled to a president whose disapproval in the Gallup poll hit 60% on Tuesday." And her final comment, "Those in the Never Trump camp saw exactly this situation as the inevitable outcome of the GOP's Faustian bargain with Trump. If they lose the House in 2018 and the White House in 2020, perhaps some soul-searching and creative destruction on the right can lead to a functional, respectable center party, a center-right party that demands experienced leaders with a moral core." Wow. When we've got Republicans attacking Trump in such a credible way, it's great just to quote them and let them do that heavy lifting. The news broke this morning while I was having breakfast here in California that a shooter had injured 5 people on the Republican congressional baseball team as they were holding a practice in advance of a game with the Democrats. And the congressperson who was injured is a fellow from Louisiana, Steve Scalise, who is a hard-right Republican and a guy who really is one of the people who led the charge to repeal what was called, in House Vote 77, a rule that was enacted to restrict gun sales to severely mentally ill individuals. Now, I'm not saying this is karma. I'm not saying that this is some sort of cosmic payback. But this shooting, which will be overcovered by the corporate media and used to blame liberals, is another example of the deep ironies of those who believe that more guns are the answer. Now, there were armed people from the Capitol Police and from security details who were right there on the field. And the Alexandria, Virginia police arrived within 3 minutes of notification that shooting had begun. And the argument that comes from the NRA that, the solution to bad guys with a gun are good guys with guns doesn't really hold up that well. And I don't believe that you can prevent all of these incidents in a country that has more guns than citizens. And we have no indication that the shooter in this case, who is now dead, Thomas, his name is Tom, but his full name is James Thomas Hodgkinson, age 66, of Belleville, Illinois. That's a suburb of St. Louis. And we know that Hodgkinson is a Bernie Sanders supporter and a Trump hater. I mean, it is amazing how quickly the social media postings of a previously unknown individual can get spilled when they put themselves into the news in this grisly kind of way. So there were 2 people of Steve Scalise's protective detail. They were armed. They exchanged fire with the gunman. And so this is going to be spun that, wow, even more people would have died if we didn't have armed individuals there. And while that could be a rational argument, I don't believe that it holds water over, multiple cases and, lengthy periods of time. But I already heard on Rush Limbaugh's show this morning that this is going to be blamed on the liberal disease because of Hodgkinson's politics. And Bernie Sanders has issued a strong statement. I am sickened by this despicable act. Let me be as clear as I can be. Violence of any kind is unacceptable in our society. I condemn this action in the strongest possible terms. Real change can only come about through nonviolent action. But that will be ignored because the people on the right, especially Limbaugh and Hannity, I hear them on a regular basis. They claim to understand the liberal mind and this virus called liberalism so well that nothing we say can change their determinations. I'll add Michael Savage to the list, too. He's a right-wing radio host who is a proven idiot and nut. But he, I'm sure, in fact, he's on the air as I'm speaking to you now, and I'm sure that he is demonizing liberals and trivializing those of us who call for reasonable gun laws in this country. And so I think this one is going to be an episode that will be used to hammer Democrats and others, at least for the foreseeable future. We're still hearing fallout from yesterday's Senate Intelligence Committee hearing where they got evasive testimony from Attorney General Jeff Sessions. And one of the things that I meant to mention yesterday is that none of the senators bothered to ask Jeff Sessions, Jeffrey Beauregard Jim Crow Sessions III, if in fact he had threatened to resign or offered to resign in conversations with Trump in recent weeks, as has been reported in the media. So nobody brought that up. And also yesterday, I think I failed to mention that we learned only in the last 48 hours that the special counsel, former FBI Director Bob Mueller, actually interviewed at the White House with Trump for the FBI director's job he would be returning after having served a 12-year term. And the very next day, apparently without Trump's knowledge, the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, appointed Mueller to the special counsel job, and we now know that Trump has been looking at ways, perhaps firing Mueller. We're told he's been talked down from that for the time being, but he seems to like, the ambiguity there and leaving a kind of threat to Mueller that he could be fired at any time. That's the way Trump operates with intimidation and extortion tactics. The other piece from the hearing that continues to cause tongues to wag was the strong interrogation of Sessions by the junior senator from California, Democrat Kamala Harris. And I mentioned this yesterday because I was offended the way John McCain interrupted Senator Harris and essentially asked the chairman, Richard Burr, to chastise her because she was being too aggressive with Jeff Sessions. And this is a real sexist situation. Because as I pointed out yesterday, we saw both Democrats, well, it was actually Democrats, an independent named Angus King from Maine, and a Republican from Arkansas, Tom Cotton, who all tried to interrupt the Attorney General in order to get answers to their questions within the very tight 5-minute time limit that they each faced. But it was only Kamala Harris who was singled out for criticism, and that criticism continues. On CNN last night, one guy, this guy Miller, used to work at the Justice Department. He referred to her behavior as hysterical. Now, she was not at all hysterical. She was firm. She was dogged. She was not taking any bullshit. But because she is a woman with limited seniority, and I would submit as well, a woman of color, one of her parents was Indian, the other African American, I believe that she is being shabbily treated and that John McCain owes her an apology because this is the second time he's done this. When they were interviewing Rosenstein last week, Harris operated in a similar manner, trying to get him to answer her questions. So last night on Facebook, I was shocked because a guy I know, he's a former radio DJ who's been in the voiceover trade for a long time. His name is John Driscoll, and I know he's a more conservative guy just from reading his Facebook posts in the past. But he responded to an article, Kamala Harris questioning cut off for a second week in a row. And he commented, cut off? She was excessively rude and would not give an elderly man any time. She was reading from a prepared script. This is the example of where the DNC thinks they can court favor using the same rules of Alinsky. America is being divided by these rules. Now, that reference to Saul Alinsky is a favorite meme of right-wing radio hosts. They love to, Hannity does it all the time, Saul Alinsky, and they connect it to Obama's work as a community organizer. It's a very lame reference. So I posted in reaction, at least 5 male senators who questioned Sessions before Harris interrupted Jefferson, including conservative darling Tom Cotton, but only Harris drew McCain's objection. And John Driscoll responded by referring to Kamala Harris. And I'm going to use the language here. I'm sorry if it offends you. But in all caps, he said she is a cunt. And then he repeated, a fucking cunt. Now, this shows that the anger, the racism and sexism, the paternalism that's been unleashed by Donald Trump remains unleashed and virulent in the general population right now. Now, I resisted engaging with Driscoll on his level. And this morning, in the thread where he has, by the way, removed his offensive language, I just wrote, note to self, don't engage in political threads with Driscoll. And somebody who was more thoughtful and persuasive, a guy named Pete Salant, posted, come on, John. Your use of that beyond vulgar word to describe how you view her appears to reveal that you are deeply disturbed about something, probably unrelated to this woman or this incident. Seeing your comment, your peers might think, wow, John needs to get laid. Or, has John been constipated for a few days? Only out-of-touch elderly guys use this sickening sexist slang term in the way you did. If Ms. Harris had been a man, the other senators would never have called her out for demanding answers. She behaved no differently from the others who had already taken their turn to grill Sessions. And John, elderly? Sessions is 70. You can't be more than a few years behind him, and we can be sure that you don't view yourself as elderly. And the only lame response from John Driscoll was, I knew I would get this type of blowback, but when women refer to men as being dicks, then women get the term cunts. That's the way I exercise my freedom of speech. Choose your words wisely. Well, I really don't think there is an equivalent. And there's also no excuse for engaging in that kind of character assassination, crude as it is. Also, another story we covered yesterday here on the News and Comment podcast that drew some reaction is about Megyn Kelly and her promotion for her interview scheduled for this Sunday night with Alex Jones. Once again, I'll tell you that I don't like Alex Jones. He is a scourge in many ways. And because he raises some questions that I also raise, I believe that he is a useful idiot for the corporate media and the powers who want to control the narrative, to basically paint him as a radical extremist nutball, and so that anybody else who, for example, raises questions about 9/11 and the official story, I, by the way, have never called it an inside job because I don't know. But I know the official story is bullshit. And because on that basis, Alex Jones and I hold a similar view, well, this public ritual humiliation of him will be used to marginalize those of us who are skeptical and who ask questions about some of these official narrative events. And so I support NBC's right to broadcast Megyn Kelly's interview with Alex Jones. I don't believe that it should be censored. I don't believe that the parents from Sandy Hook who feel aggrieved and hurt by the comments that Alex Jones has made should be able to block its broadcast. They don't have to watch it. Nobody does. You can flip over to 60 Minutes. Last week they had a hard-hitting profile of Bruno Mars. And Megyn Kelly is right, saying, look, journalists shine a light on those with power, those with influence, those who have become culturally relevant. And a New York Times writer named Jim Rutenberg, who interviewed Jones and quoted him for an article a few months ago in February, didn't get any of this kind of blowback. And Rutenberg also notes that in 2013, Piers Morgan at CNN and Nightline on ABC featured interviews and segments on Alex Jones. There were no advertiser pullouts. J.P. Morgan has pulled out of NBC over this, or major Twitter campaigns against them. And so I find this especially offensive. And some of my friends on the left are joining the scrum, demanding that this interview not be aired on NBC. And a post from one of my Facebook friends, Nicole Bell, was up yesterday. Tell Megyn Kelly, don't give Sandy Hook denier Alex Jones a platform. NBC and Megyn Kelly should not legitimize Alex Jones' hateful rhetoric. They should not provide a platform for him to spread his shameful lies, not on Father's Day. And so I said in a response to this, don't sink to censorship. The best way to express your view is not to watch NBC on Sunday. Nicole responded, it's not censorship, but he's not entitled to a national platform either. I responded, how is it not censorship? Nicole has her own definition. The government shutting you down is censorship. He's free to say any crazy little thing in his head. He's not entitled to national taxpayer-paid airwaves to say it. My response, but you are entitled to decide what's aired? Come on. You're attempting to impose your view on others and prevent him from being heard, and that's censorship. Your idea of taxpayer-paid airwaves is nice, but inaccurate. And if you need an explanation for that, email me. I'll be happy to air that out. I'm not going to watch, but NBC shouldn't censor Kelly because you don't approve of Alex Jones. She replied, of course I'm not entitled to decide, Peter. What a ridiculous straw man. Well, no, Nicole, that's exactly what you're offering here. I am, however, entitled to voice my opinion that it serves no purpose other than to legitimize a man who in court documents admitted he's nothing more than a showman fooling his viewers. How's that different from Trump? How's that different from anybody on the Fox News channel? How's that different from Rachel Maddow, perceived from the view of a conservative American? And then somebody else chimed in, I don't know who this is. Having the government silence you is censorship. Having the people, capital P, show you the door and slam it behind you is what happens when you're an asshole and your message is summarily rejected. Two very different things. No. It's still censorship. And I don't approve of censorship. Every day, I pause to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. And today, instead of asking you to support me and the podcast here, I'd like to invite you to consider making a contribution to the GoFundMe campaign. I'll link to it in the show file for this podcast. It's a campaign to raise $6,000 to support my friend Tom Seaborn. Tom is a longtime radio broadcaster and program director in Eureka, California. And he had a serious accident recently where he fell off the top of a truck, and he could have been killed. He did severe damage to a wrist and to his vertebrae, but he is not paralyzed and is expected to recover. And I kicked in $100 yesterday to help Tom Seaborn. He's always been gracious to me. I've stayed at his house when I visited Eureka. He kept my radio program on when it was syndicated between 2003 and 2009 up in Eureka on KGOE. And I want to help return his good love and his good favor. So if you're in a position to make a contribution of any amount, please go to the GoFundMe page for Tom Seaborn and drop a little coin on him, will you please? Yesterday I mentioned that the state of Maryland and the District of Columbia had filed a lawsuit on the heels of another lawsuit, and now there is a third lawsuit from nearly 200 Democratic members of Congress, all based on the same central issue, that Trump has violated the emoluments clause by continuing to own businesses that will benefit from his position as president and the desire of people to curry favor with him. I support all of these lawsuits, and we will see, probably in a couple of years, if they have any real impact. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, the primary yesterday produced two candidates for governor who are moderates. Ed Gillespie, the former Republican National Committee chairman, he took an uncomfortably close victory from a guy named Corey Stewart, who was a former Trump state campaign chair and who was running on a campaign to preserve Virginia's Confederate history. Now, on the Democratic side, the moderate candidate is Ralph Northam, the lieutenant governor backed by Terry McAuliffe and the Democratic machine, and he defeated Tom Perrello, a more liberal insurgent challenger who was supported by Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. I know a lot of people try to turn these into some sort of predictor of what will happen in 2018, but governor's races are routinely, produce moderates because of the population and because of the profile that people look for in a governor. And I would submit that this really doesn't tell us anything about the future battles between Democrats and Republicans. In the state of Michigan, the Attorney General, who is a hypocrite named Bill Schuette, and I call him a hypocrite because just a couple of years ago, he was protecting the Republican governor and his cronies from criticism and legal action over the decision to feed poisoned water to the citizens of Flint. This was a budget-cutting move that was enabled by Governor Snyder's appointment of an emergency manager under a law that had been repealed by the voters but then reinstated by the Republican-controlled legislature. And I am gratified to see that the former emergency manager, Darnell Earley, is one of 5 people who's been indicted for involuntary manslaughter. But Governor Snyder should be the 6th person indicted in that case. Here's more environmental crime. You've heard Trump talk about beautiful babies, especially Syrian babies related to the alleged chemical weapons incident in April in Syria. Well, beautiful American babies are going to be made ill, and some will die, because Scott Pruitt over there, the wrecking crew guy in charge of the EPA, he has announced a plan to suspend the implementation of a rule that was imposed under the Obama administration related to air pollution rules, and this will lead to asthma and to cancer because benzene is one of the critical elements that was regulated by this rule. And finally today, a thoughtful email from listener and subscriber Jerry Fresia, who is an expatriate American living in northern Italy. And he writes in reaction to Monday's News and Comment podcast, I do not support third-party efforts unless they are used to politicize the limitations of the two-party system. As we all know, the only time a third party became one of the two major parties is when the Whigs in the 1850s were torn apart by the regional divisions preceding the Civil War. Probably the strongest third-party effort ever was the rise of the People's Party in 1896. They got about 25% support in roughly 15 states, and in the end they were folded into the Democratic Party, largely because of the Electoral College requirement of needing a majority of electors. But there are 2 other institutional constraints, Jerry notes: single-member districts, which mitigate against multi-parties in Congress, and plurality elections, as opposed to majority elections, which encourages lesser evilism. So these 3 features of our political structure make third parties largely ineffective, and he says that that's even more than ballot or debate access. Bernie's run accomplished so much more than the 2 Nader runs or even the run of billionaire Ross Perot, who despite his 19% of the vote got 0 electors. And Jerry is correct about that. So he makes some good comments here, and I appreciate his feedback to our News and Comment podcast. That does it for today. This is the podcast that's distributed free every day. It's available on YouTube. You can spread the word about that. And I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.